Many years back, there was this game called Rules of Engagement. It was never very big, and I imagine most people don't even remember it, but it tried to be an extremely realistic space combat game. I mean, realism on the order of what we might see with DCS. And not since Rules of Engagement have I seen a game or a space combat sim so devoted to that concept as Nebulous Fleet Commander. So I have to say honestly, I am really excited about this. I don't know whether to call it a game or a simulator. It seems to straddle the line between both. Right now, I'm working on setting up a simple combat mission in which my team or flight of 4 ships will attempt to capture territory in that asteroid field from another equivalent team or flight of 4 ships. We'll just call them a flight, same as we would with aircraft. Better, let's call them a fleet. Now, you'll probably notice right away that the graphics are not the best. In fact, I would say they're reminiscent of games from the late 90s to the early 2000s. But just as with some of the best military combat simulators, such as Command Modern Operations, which is so realistic, there are classified versions that are used to train military personnel in strategic thinking. Nebulous does not aim to be the prettiest thing out there. It aims for utter and absolute realism. Imagine the human species 1 to 200 years in the future. This is not a time when we're flying around the universe using things that are probably always going to be restricted to the realm of science fiction, such as jump drives, quantum drives, wormhole technology, whatever. It's more like what we see in The Expanse, where human technology is limited by simple factors, that the maximum speed in space is light. And it would take a long time to reach light speed at even 1g of acceleration, even if a ship were capable of carrying enough fuel to reach that. For physics reasons we won't go into in depth here. Suffice it to say that the closer you get to relativistic speeds, or speeds approaching the speed of light, the more energy is required to carry on acceleration. It's not really an accurate analogy, but it's almost as if objects attain more mass as they gain relativistic speeds. So our ships are limited by physical realities. They also don't have infinite energy. They certainly don't have anything like shields, for which there's no physical phenomenon that we know of that could create something like shields we see in Star Trek, other than perhaps magnetism, and that would be stretching it. No, these ships are more like if the Navy managed to put ships into space in 1 to 200 years, and it applies weapons and technology that, insofar as we understand physics to work, or how physics realistically could work, to govern the actions of these fleets. Now, who knows, maybe at some point in the indeterminate future, if humans don't manage to destroy themselves, we may find ways so superior to moving about in space and technology so superior to this that something like Star Trek could become reality. But Nebulous presumes that does not happen, and it tries to make space combat extraordinarily realistic according to what we know of how space combat would work. Another thing I really like about Nebulous is I'm so tired of space games that present all combat as BFM, basic fighter maneuvers, where the enemy is in close visual range, where ships that weigh many tons can turn on a dime like a Star Citizen. Did anyone hear me say that? Yeah, that's right. I know some of you have really loved my Star Citizen combat videos, and I like making them, but the truth is I very quickly find ship combat in Star Citizen to be both childish and boring. I know some of you Star Citizen fans are going to be upset about that. One of these days, I'm going to make a video demonstrating why, showing what real air-to-air combat looks like, just at modern technology, where enemies are taken down at 5 miles, 10 miles, 100 miles away, well beyond visual range, and everything that's required to do that versus Star Citizen's basically point, shoot, click kind of combat style. Anyway, this isn't about which style of game is best. If you like that type of combat, that's fine. I just really like realistic simulation. And Nebulous Fleet Command provides that in spades. I mean, I'm one of those strange guys that likes DCS because it's ultra realistic. I liked Command Modern Operations because you didn't just drive a bunch of boats and subs into an area and start blowing things up. It took a tremendous amount of thought to do it right, because in reality, a gigantic aircraft carrier can be taken down with a single torpedo. So you have to think. You have to be stealthy. You have to fight smart. You have to understand the technology and how it works on both sides. I just love that. Now, while Nebulous does not have the most impressive graphics, the scale of its graphics and the realism of everything that's going on once you come to understand it makes the graphics as they are absolutely breathtaking in my opinion. Yeah, the individual asteroids and everything, they don't look great, but I'm hoping that eventually the developers, this game is just in beta, but I'm hoping eventually the developers will improve these looks, but I do like that they are focusing on realism. But when you understand everything that's going on, it makes a double wide screen, which you can see, which I'm using here. It just makes the game really breathtaking to behold, I think. So while I usually just restrict the view of my videos to a single equivalent of a 1920 by 1080 screen, here I've used OBS to expand the view to the entire width and breadth of the double wide screen that I'm using. It's also going to be necessary to do this because there is so much going on in Nebulous. Up on the left, we have a list of our ships in the fleet. Down on the right, we have systems and status. We have each ship's individual health of systems showing, and there's plenty more going on. And I'm going to take some time and try to walk you through what is going on and help you understand what Nebulous is and really why this brand new space combat sim, which I don't think too many people even know exists yet. It's only around $25 on Steam, and I'm Canadian. That's Canadian price, probably only 20 in the States. But why this honestly is such a big deal, and it's so much fun. It has great single player options, great multiplayer options, a huge fan base of a community already. It's awesome. Let's take a look at what's going on. So this is one of the most basic missions. This is a skirmish and AI is operating the other set of ships. I chose to go with just an AI mission here because I can stop and pause it at key points to explain things. And to tell you the truth, this game is so complicated that even after messing with it for a couple months, I'm still learning. I haven't been able to put as much time into it, honestly, as I would like to have over the last couple months because I've been doing a lot of things with DCS and the DCS videos and some things with Star Citizen and the Star Citizen videos, but I've been wanting to get around to start making videos about Nebulous. I'm utterly fascinated with it. So here we go. So right now I am in what's called the tactical view. And the tactical view shows our combat arena in a 3D screen with some virtual visual aids so that the viewer can better perceive things such as distances and depth. It also provides information on such things as your weapons ranges, active and passive radar ranges, and more information besides. Now, as you already know, our goal is to travel into this asteroid field and capture 5 strategically important areas: Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and Echo. But we absolutely cannot just fly into there helter-skelter, mad dash, Call of Duty style and just pray that we see the enemy first and shoot them first, because I guarantee you that's an absolutely certain way to be slaughtered. Electronic warfare and strategic thinking is a hugely important part of Nebulous Fleet Command. And in this mission, we need to take advantage of our cover. Our goal is to either detect the enemy first, and if we can't detect him first, make sure that if he detects us first, it quickly puts him at a serious disadvantage. So what I've done so far is I've moved my fleet of 3 at solar north of the map, the top side, into the closest strategic area to be captured. 2 of the ships in this fleet are gunships. They are only carrying cannons, and one of the ships is a missile boat, carrying a hefty collection of missiles. Missiles are like gold in Nebulous Fleet Command. No matter how many you're carrying, they're never enough, but if you can make good use of them, they get the job done. But neither those missiles, nor the platforms or ships that are carrying them can be wasted. Now I've captured the territory in Solar North, and I'm going to begin carefully moving the fleet toward the next closest strategic area to capture. If the enemy is out here, and he is, I want him to reveal himself by shooting at one of those gunships first. And most likely he'll do this by shooting first at the Loom of Carina, which actually often ends up getting targeted first. I think it just gives a bit more of a radar signature, and radar signatures are a very complex target in Nebulous. If you folks like these videos on Nebulous, I'll make more about this, and we'll take a very close look at electronic warfare, radar, how it works, radar signatures and such down the line. But what I'm going to do right now is follow naval doctrine and put my best asset, the missile frigate Blue Brook, behind the 2 gunships. Behind them, of course, being a relative term. If we encounter the enemy, I think I'll have Blue Brook behind the gunships. I'll use the gunships to draw the enemy's fire, and then use Blue Brook to open up with missiles on the enemy positions. And with that done, and a course plotted to the next strategic position, I'm going to go down to Stout Coral, which is my other missile frigate. Now, I've found this asteroid here with a small opening in the middle. It's kind of like a big rocky donut. And cover and radar shadows are a very real thing in Nebulous. I've used the Stout Coral to capture a nearby strategic territory, and now I'm going to position this gunship closer to the wall of this asteroid and shut down most everything that can generate an electronic signal. And I'm just going to hide her here. I'm going to hold her in reserve until I know where the enemy is. Now, if you're used to these types of games, sort of capture territory kind of games, you're probably thinking, what are you doing? You got to go charging out there and just risk everything and capture territory. I can guarantee you in Nebulous, if you do that, you'll be dead in 10 minutes. All your ships will be gone. And to win in Nebulous, you cannot waste any assets. It's a lot like actual naval combat. Your assets are not expendable. Besides, I have a reason for doing this beyond just hiding that ship. You'll see as we go along. Now here I am readjusting the formation position of the Bluebrook missile frigate relative to the two gunships. I want to make sure that as we continue to navigate through these asteroids, the Bluebrook stays at the furthest point away from where I think the enemy ships are likely to appear. Now, one of the neat things about Nebulous is while the simulator is extremely complex and very realistic, the controls are really quite accessible. You don't sit in the cockpit of any of these ships and directly steer it with a joystick. I hope the developers will implement something like that one of these days. That would really be cool, but I don't know if that's ever intended for this. This is a strategic game, almost like you're playing a naval simulator and chess, and these very complex ships are your pieces. Even so, there are many controls that are used to manage them, yet you don't have a lot of keyboard keys to memorize, very little in fact. Most everything that you need to do, you can access with a simple right click of your mouse to pull up a submenu, or by clicking on the panel's upper left or lower right. To move a ship, we just either click on the ship itself, or we click on the card with its name in the upper left, and then press F, which I have mapped to one of the buttons on my mice, and that brings our perspective over to that ship. Then we can right click anywhere on the view, select move from the submenu, and that'll bring up a movement widget. Using the widget, we can command the ship to go anywhere else on the tactical map. Now, it really takes some getting used to working in 3D like this, and the game is 3D. You can rotate the ships, turn the ships, spin the ships, just like a ship would move in real space. It doesn't even have to face the direction it's going, which is important because when you're very concerned about electronic warfare, it can be quite advantageous to turn your ship to minimize its reflective radar profile. But you can position that ship anywhere in 3D space simply by selecting the position option and then using the movement widget to tell the ship where you want it to go. You can also use the heading widget and just point the ship in a direction and tell it to go that direction and give it a speed. At this point in the Sim's development, you cannot dictate a precise speed. You can rather tell it to go at 1/3, 2/3, full, or flank. Flank, of course, having some risk of damaging your engines if you maintain it long enough. You can also use position to tell a ship where to go and use heading and roll to keep your ship pointed in another direction, which will slow the ship's ability to accelerate but minimize its reflective radar surface or maximize the positioning of the ship's radar receiver panels, improving their ability to pick up contacts. But hiding the Bluebrook missile frigate near this asteroid has worked. I received a communication that the enemy is currently capturing strategic position Echo. The Bluebrook carries a complement of 8 active radar-guided Thunderhead cruise missiles. Now, before these missiles go to active radar guidance, I can set waypoints for them and steer them around asteroids so they approach in a very stealthy manner. Thus, I can steer the missiles around and between obstacles, at the same time keeping the Stout Coral safely hidden and behind cover. I can also zoom the camera in on the missile's view. I can also tell the virtual camera to follow any view by hovering the mouse over an object, including my missiles, and pressing F, and then I can zoom in or out with the mouse wheel and fly the camera around horizontally or up and down using the WASD and EC keys. Alright, the missiles are on their final approach, and they are sending telemetry back to my other ships. The Stout Coral can't receive it because it's behind rocks, but my other ships can. They spotted 2 frigates in the area and locked on to the closer one. And, as luck would have it, every missile hits. That's 1 enemy frigate down. In fact, I seem to have pretty quickly taken out his engines, meaning his companion gunship flying in close formation behind him just barely managed to avoid hitting him, I think. Part of the realism here, you can see that there is detritus venting off the side of the ships. This indicates internal projectile damage as those missiles exploded and then internal systems exploded. You can also see the gas escaping the ship's hull. This means that the hull itself has taken some substantial breaches. And then, once the missiles were gone, used up, we no longer received telemetry from that area, so it seems as if the enemy ship vanished from our view. Now, I know the position of one of the other enemy gunships, but I really don't want to risk the stout coral just yet because the enemy still has two much more dangerous missile frigates. So I'm going to order the stout coral just a little bit forward, but keep the radars off and hope that I can pick up the signature of the other enemy gunship on my passive radars. In fact, pretty soon I'll be able to use the active radar from one of my gunships to Solar North, perhaps to lock onto those ships and then transmit that telemetry to the stout coral. I cannot simply navigate more Thunderhead missiles that way. Those are the missiles which you can set waypoints for and then which will go to their own active radars, simply because the stout coral's out. I have other types of missiles that rely on my own ship's radar and locks. But the stout coral only carried 8 Thunderheads. See what I mean? Missiles are precious in this game. They are like gold. When you use them, make sure you use them well. Now here, in Solar North, my fleet of 3 ships, the 2 gunships and the missile frigate, have come under fire, and just as I was hoping, it was the Loom of Carina that came under fire. Not that I disliked that ship, but I was hanging that ship out there for bait. It's a bigger ship, so it reflects more radar energy, and I purposely put it out front of my missile frigate. It looks like one of the enemies took the bait and they're going after the Loom of Carina. And while I do not yet have a radar track on the enemy ship, I can visually see the direction those missiles are coming from. The missile frigate up here is the Blue Brook, and she's carrying a lot more Thunderheads. I'm going to plot the course for a substantial volley of Thunderheads now, and send them off in the direction of that fire, and hopefully we get lucky and they hit something. I'm going to take my time plotting the course of those Thunderheads too, because seriously, every missile counts. I've ordered her to fire a volley of 10 missiles. Unfortunately, none of these missiles are going to hit. The AI in this sim is good, and as we'll soon discover, the enemy ship came around the asteroid, detected my fleet of 3 ships, or if nothing else, the Loom of Carina gunship, and sent a volley of missiles at the Loom of Carina. And then it ducked back behind the asteroid for cover, so when I returned fire with that 10 missiles, I didn't tell those missiles to go around the asteroid and look that way, so unfortunately for me, all my missiles end up missing.
What are our orders, Commander?
Now, in some other very realistic military simulators, such as Command Modern Operations, there's a lot more boredom than anything happening. Soldiers have a saying, war is 99% boredom and 1% sheer terror. Well, we are in the sheer terror part of things, because there is a lot going on. And I cannot just launch those missiles and watch and wait to see what happens with them. We'll get back to them. But as this is an educational video, I've paused time and returned to the stout coral, where I see she's picked up 2 contacts around an asteroid. Looks to be roughly 3 and 6 kilometers away and a little change. Since the enemy has 1 2-ship fleet to Solar North, taking on my fleet of 3 ships, and I just took out one of their gunships to the starboard of the stout coral, the one ship that's about 3 kilometers off is probably the surviving gunship that was starboard, and the one 6 kilometers off will be the other enemy frigate. I have the jump on both. Neither seems to know I'm here at this time, and if at all possible, I would certainly like to take them both out with the stout coral. But the higher priority between the 2 is the missile frigate by far. So I'm going to lock onto the missile frigate at 6 kilometers. It's well within range, and I'm going to risk at this point going to active radar, as well as turning on my data transmitter and receiver so that I can share data with the rest of the fleet and get an even better lock. Now you will immediately notice that those tracks vanished, and now there are a lot of flashing icons trying to tell me I have no idea where the enemy actually is. The enemy is attempting to jam my lock. They're attempting to use electronic counter warfare, and fortunately I have an answer to that, the electronic counter warfare. The stout coral has a particularly capable radar that is capable of burning through an enemy's attempt to jam, provided I point my radar in the right direction. I also activated my own jammers, which is causing the missiles they got off on me to miss. which is really important because a single missile can do a lot of damage to a relatively small ship like a frigate. The Stout Coral is a very capable ship, but it's no battleship. It can't absorb much damage. A single missile is not likely to destroy it, but it can sure create some hardship. In the meantime, I've burned through the enemy's electronic counter warfare attempt, and I'm now sending a volley of missiles back in the enemy's direction. That's awesome. None of their volley was able to hit me. But the enemy missile frigate is a capable ship, the equivalent of my Blue Brook. I'm not going to take any chances with it. I'm going to send a second volley of missiles at it right after the first. The missiles that I'm using now are Hurricanes. They use my ship's own radar tracking to lock onto the target. That can be a weakness because it means I have to keep my ship in the line of sight to the enemy ship so I don't break the lock. Though I can use a lock from one of the other ships in their data transmission to also maintain telemetry on the enemy ship. The great strength of these missiles is they are very hard for an enemy ship to evade. All it can really do is shoot them down because if one of my missiles misses or the enemy uses flak to encourage a miss, Hurricane missiles will just use the telemetry provided by my ships and turn around and just keep attempting to hit the enemy ship until they run out of fuel or the enemy ship can manage to shoot them down. Alright, we're going to freeze time and take a look and see how things are going towards Solar North again. Now at this point I figured out that the enemy ship hiding in the Bravo strategic area has ducked behind that asteroid, and it too is a very capable missile frigate. In fact, I would say even more capable than the Blue Brook. So again, I have to fight smart. Now that I know where he is, I just can't go running in there gung-ho style. That one ship is capable of taking out my entire little fleet of 3 ships if I do so. I have to fight smart. And that's what I love about Nebulous. I always have to fight smart. There is no running in gung-ho in the simulator. Fight stupid and pay for it. So I'm going to find the best course to plot another salvo of Thunderhead missiles. Those are the missiles with active radar, which can be steered like cruise missiles from one waypoint to the next, until they are set to turn on their radar and finally track a target. Now I tried at first to steer those missiles around solar east of that asteroid, but after playing with potential trajectories for a moment, I realized that the best course was to steer those missiles around solar north over the top of the asteroid and then have them dive down just solar east of the Bravo strategic area, whereupon they would switch to active radar and look for any potential tracks to target. And this proves to be an effective strategy. Let's pop back over to the Stout Coral and see what's going on. We'll unfreeze time, and we should see that her 2 salvos of missiles are having some luck here. It is a lot of missiles, and missile frigates tend to have missile defenses. We can see it shooting some of those missiles down with point defense. It also has chaff to deflect a few. And yes, we can see they all miss, but what's this? Those missiles aren't done. They're swinging back around. They aren't finished with the enemy ship. They're going to fly around till they score some hits. And because I need to be damn sure to take out that enemy ship, I'm going to launch yet another salvo. You can't waste missiles, but you need to know when it's time to use them, and now's the time to use them. I have a bead on the enemy ship. I have it heavily targeted under a lot of assault. It's really busy. I need to keep it busy and continue to push the initiative that I've taken. So I've prepared to launch the missiles, but I haven't launched them yet. I want to see what happens here. And look, 2 hits. 2 missile hits on a smallish frigate is a significant amount of damage. We aren't done yet. Before the enemy missile frigate has a chance to repair whatever damage has been done, I'm going to launch another small salvo. Between the 4 missiles I already have there and what's incoming, that should definitively take out that ship, leaving only 1 gunship in the area. While the goal to win this game is to capture the strategic territories, or at least capture enough of them to gain more points than the enemy, there is so much combat right now that capturing those territories has really become secondary. You can win this mission by taking out the enemy's entire fleet. And as that's suddenly become possible, that's what I'm going to aim to do. Back up in Solar North, we have our second volley of missiles, a large volley, quite an investment, already sent off toward where I believe the enemy ship is. And yeah, he's definitely there. He's launching flak to try to pull them off target, but we are scoring hits. He's killed one of the missiles, but two have already hit at least for sure, and that one missed. But we can see by the fires and the gases that he's venting that he's taken several hits. I think that salvo contained 10 missiles or so. And of that 10, it looks like 3 to 4 hit, but 3 to 4 is adequate. He's taken substantial damage. I'm going to push my advantage here and move my small fleet to Solar North in closer to him and finish that ship off. The ships can repair themselves, not entirely. Oh, he's just vanished from my scopes. Remember, those Thunderhead missiles give the launching ship telemetry. They provide information on the enemy's position and condition, but once the Thunderheads are gone, no more information, which is why it looks like he's vanished. He's still there. This isn't a bug, but we just can't see him anymore. But I'm still going to push my small fleet down in his direction because I know he's there. I know he's hurt. Now, the ships in Nebulous can repair themselves, not fully. There's a limit to how much they can repair themselves. They have a limit to the number of resources available for repairs, and damaged components can only be restored so far. But a limping missile frigate is still a very dangerous missile frigate. And while the limp is bad, before he has much chance to really effect some meaningful repairs, I want to get down there and hit him again, and if at all possible, finish him off. Moving in the three-dimensional space of Nebulous is no easy task. It's not overly complicated, but it does take practice and it takes some getting used to. I'm hoping one day that the developers implement a better way to move around, maybe a way to punch in a three-dimensional course for a ship to follow, such as 90 degrees solar east and 84 degrees solar south, so that you can immediately give a ship a specific heading to follow. I would also like to see them give the ability to punch in specific speeds on the ship. Or perhaps the option of looking at the tactical map from the perspective of a three-dimensional grid, so that you can just tell your ships to go to one grid section or another. Now let's return to the stout coral and see what's going on with those salvos of missiles that we fired. We should see the enemy ship taking some more damage. At least I sure hope so. I've invested a lot into destroying this ship.
What are our orders, Commander?
I can see already that some of the missiles I've launched have hit. The ship is venting gases, which means she's taken some hull damage and she hasn't had an opportunity to repair it, which means her damage control crews are scrambling to repair more significant damage inside the ship. Wait, no, it's all over. You see those little icons that look like circles with little pods inside? At least when they immediately launched from the ship, and now that they are away from the ship, they look like very, very tiny ships or shuttles. Those are escape pods. It means the ship has taken an extreme degree of damage. Internal fires are either running rampant or possibly the fusion reactor has been breached and is heading toward an out-of-control reaction, which would create a dramatic and dangerous explosion. I hope not, because the enemy ship is close enough that a reactor explosion would damage the stout coral. But whatever else is going on, that enemy ship is now just a burning shell. That's 2 enemy ships done, but the enemy is still very dangerous, and it has adequate firepower to finish off all 4 of my ships. That's something else that I really love about Nebulous. You know, in the real world, as I mentioned earlier, a whole aircraft carrier can be taken down with a single enemy missile or torpedo, meaning a single small jet fighter can potentially destroy an aircraft carrier, a missile cruiser, a frigate. When fleets actually go into combat, it's not a simple contest of size, mass, or tonnage, unlike you see in many games. Unlike in Star Citizen, a single warhead, infinitesimally small in comparison to an enemy ship, can destroy that ship. And likewise, in Nebulous, one single capable missile cruiser, if I should go off my guard, could take out my entire fleet. So I have to be careful not to become cocky or overconfident, because while I'm ahead of the game, it's not over yet. Once I've taken out the enemy's other missile frigate, then it'll mostly be over. Then all the enemy will still have is one virtually unscathed gunship. Now that's a dangerous opponent, but nothing that 2 gunships can't handle. And if my remaining missile frigates have even a half dozen missiles left between them, they could take down that single remaining gunship easily, provided the gunship doesn't get a drop on them. And that also is an important proviso. In Nebulous, you have to always be on your toes. Always attempting to think ahead of the enemy. Speaking of which, that opposing gunship has gotten off another salvo of missiles at me. My missile cruiser has point defenses, but as you've already seen from the combat so far, point defenses of all kinds can be overwhelmed, whether we're talking point defense guns, anti-missile missiles, or flak. So since I don't know if my missile frigate's going to survive this salvo he's just launched at me, I'm hoping he made the mistake of sending that toward one of the gunships. And since I don't know, I'm going to launch all the hurricane missiles I still have back at him, so that, if nothing else, I can take him out too. Well, the good news is I'm pretty sure by the enemy missiles' trajectories that he's launched those missiles at my gunships. Yep, he has made the mistake of launching those missiles toward the loom of Carina, which I can defend with my own missile frigate's defenses. And that was probably a fatal mistake for him. Most likely, I can get my hurricanes onto the enemy before he can effectively retarget my fleet again. But we're not going to be able to watch how that plays out just now, because I know that there is an enemy gunboat very close to the stout coral, most likely between 6 and 10 kilometers based on previous telemetry. And since it should know where I am, I imagine he's going to be heading this way. In fact, yes he is. We can see where he is launching projectiles. We don't have sufficient optical sensors to get a visual on him at this time, but we have a radar track and origin of fire. So what I need to do is quickly send whatever missiles I still have available, which is only a single hurricane and a dozen riposte missiles. That's not great. Riposte missiles are generally used as a form of point defense, missiles that you can use to target enemy missiles, an anti-missile missile if you will. And they have a very limited range, 10,000 meters if memory serves, so I'm going to have to get in pretty close to be able to target him with ripostes. So what I'm going to do is try to distract him by sending that single hurricane his way and head at full speed directly toward him, close the distance as fast as possible, hope that he doesn't inflict too much damage on the stout coral with his guns, and see if I can get in range to get that dozen riposte missiles off on him. Ripostes are small missiles, they don't hit all that hard, but a dozen of them should make a dent. Yet an additional problem to consider is that the closer I get to him, the more accurate his guns will become. Now let's see what's going on back up at Solar North. We can see that my volley is underway and they are almost there. But the bugger is making effective use of chaff. And on top of that, he is ducking back behind that asteroid. And I love that. I really do. Nebulous has good AI already, and this game is only deeply in beta. There is a lot more development to happen. But this sim thinks it makes you work for a victory. And you can't say that about the AI in a lot of games, not even the best sims. Even diehard fans of hardcore simulators like DCS, like me, often criticize that flight simulators' artificial intelligence. Nebulous has pretty good AI. However, where my missiles missed, perhaps my guns can succeed. I'm going to have both gunships go ahead and open up in this direction. And I'm going to keep them opened up in this direction until we can close in enough to perhaps get one more effective salvo off. Now moving back down to the stout coral, let's see how we're doing. Off on the right, we can see a miniature damage control panel. There's a couple orange areas, places we've taken damage, but they are non-critical. We are still in the fight. Developers, I know you're working hard on this, but it would be awesome if one of these days, the damage control panels would actually show icons of what is hit. Now I'm going to adjust the direction that we're heading and get us moving directly toward the enemy ship. We want to close the ground between that ship and us as fast as possible and get those riposte missiles off.
Turning up the engines now.
Time is of the essence here. We have to see if we can get close enough to him to get our missiles off before he does so much damage to us. We can't shoot them, so I'm going to go ahead and accelerate to flank. In Nebulous, that's a serious choice there. If you remain on flank for a while, you'll damage your engines. And the longer you're on flank, the more you'll damage them. That's a very serious situation. But now we're close enough, and we get those reposts off.
Missiles are getting low.
And they are striking home. This is going to turn the tide. The enemy ship's already venting gases. He's taking a lot of damage. He still has guns available, but he is taking a lot of damage. He's doing a lot of damage to the stout coral as well. I'm going to see if I can move the ship away now that she's done her job and hit that ship hard. Because even though that ship has used up all of her weapons, she is run dry. If I can get her mobile, I can get her over to one of the areas to capture, park her there, and soon own that territory. And if you look at the top center of the screen, you'll see a red bar and a blue bar. The two bars indicate points accumulating for having captured those strategic territories. I have 2, and the enemy has 2. I'm ahead. The enemy can't technically catch up to me right now, but if I can capture one more, it'll speed up the path to victory. Back at Solar North with my fleet of 3, I'm going to begin moving the fleet down toward the enemy position. I want to capture the strategic Bravo space and get my gunships close enough to that troublesome missile frigate for them to take it out. Whatever else, that missile frigate should have mostly expended its ordnance by now. So the plan is to send the fleet down there with a blue coral right in the middle to provide point defense cover for the 2 gunships. If I can get some missiles off on that remaining frigate, great. If not, I can get my ships in there and capture that territory and probably bring the gunships to bear. And one way or another, that should spell a win. And at the stout coral, we can see our missiles have run dry. There is nothing to do but run for one of the territories now and try to capture it. On the other hand, the stout coral's done a great job. It has taken out all by its lonesome 2 of the enemy ships. Well, more or less. That one gunship still has guns and it's peppering us pretty good. But perhaps I can free up some resources up in Solar North and provide some assistance to the stout coral. You might sense with all the dotted lines and arrows and the red cone down to the starboard of the stout coral that there are a tremendous amount of other things going on in the background, and you would be absolutely correct. I'm not discussing those things all that much because this is just to introduce Nebulous, and I don't want to overcomplicate it. If you folks like this, we'll go into an analysis of Nebulous strategy and tactics along the way. Look at the strengths and the weaknesses of the various ships, perhaps explore some battles on the other maps and the different types of battles, or many types of battles, including total conquest, where your goal is to wipe the enemy out, a kind of capture the flag type of battle, territorial occupation, and many more. I hope one day the developers manage to introduce a campaign system to this, but again, Nebulous is in early beta. Now, I've said many times that it's an early beta so far, and one of the things I want to emphasize is that even though it is only in beta, it works awesome. I have never had the sim glitch once. No lockups, no freeze-ups, I haven't been kicked off in multiplayer. It works beautifully. I'm sure those things happen, and maybe my system just works very well with it, but for me, I just haven't experienced even a single glitch so far. Not in 2 months of use. So our little fleet of 2 gunships and a missile frigate is closing in on the enemy position, as well as that territory that we want to capture.
Our sensors are all over the place. What are our orders?
But the enemy frigate is not giving up yet. Our sensors are all over the place. You heard that message, and now you can see a scattering of icons all over the screen. But the simple fact is, we are too close for those jammers to work now. You can see him just about center screen and lower right. We're going to send him some missiles from the Blue Brook and train both gunships on him. And I have to say, for mere AI, he was a particularly worthy foe. Nebulous developers, honest to God, I am seriously impressed. Not only seriously impressed, but I am absolutely having a blast with Nebulous. There is so much potential for this sim. Keep up the good work, guys. Alright, I have guns trained on him. I have my last 4 Thunderhead missiles trained on him. This missile frigate is going down this time. Worthy foe or not, it's time to put an end to him. Or at least that was the plan. He's going to take some serious hits. He's going to take some real hurt, but he's not done yet. All of those Thunderheads, as you can see though, they hit. And he's taking some serious fire from one of the gunship's armor-piercing projectiles. So he's taken a lot of hurt and he's attempting to run for it, but bugger, he just is not done yet. However, he will be eventually. And at this point, the match really is pretty much over. That one missile frigate there was their last meaningful asset and he's down. So what I'm going to do in the background is send both my missile frigates out to capture territory. I might as well, they are out of missiles, they've run dry now, they have no more offensive capability. And as well, I'm going to send the injured gunship, the Loom of Carina, off to capture territory as well. The other gunship, the Tricocelina, is fresh and undamaged, and she has her guns fully trained on the remaining enemy frigate. I'm going to keep her harassing that frigate until I see escape pods coming out of it, or it goes pop. The poor stout Coral, she was really shot all to hell taking out that last gunboat. She had to get in dangerously too close to a gunship to get off those relatively short-range riposte missiles. And while she did manage to cripple it very effectively, it's sitting there dead heat, but it still has guns and it might even have the ability to change its heading and orient itself to make best use of those guns. So it's maintained gunfire on the stout Coral throughout this entire time and absolutely peppered the hull. She needs to do some repair, and I'm going to see if I can send her some assistance in the form of gunfire so I can send the stout Coral off to capture a territory. And back up at Solar North, while the rest of my vessels are all capturing territories, I've put an end to that troubling enemy missile frigate, and I'm moving in on the enemy's last gunship, the one maintaining fire on the stout Coral, hell and determined to destroy it, and that ship has already taken a lot of damage and it's not doing well. I don't think it can even still move, but it can still shoot back. And the Loom of Carina is fresh and undamaged. I'm going to keep her closing on that ship and peppering it with her own guns. You can see that the track is not visible at the moment, it's just too far away. And you can also see from this perspective that that annoying bugger of a ship is continuing to maintain fire. I need the Blue Brook mobile and operational to get it into a territory to capture. So I'm going to keep the Loom of Carina closing, and once I've hit the thing enough that I'm pretty sure I've damaged its armor all to hell, I'm going to switch my projectiles from armor piercing to high explosive. Now, high explosives are not great at piercing armor. In fact, you wouldn't want to use them early on in a fight unless you were using a really big gun, something that you might mount on a battleship. Because those HE or high explosive shells would be able to penetrate the armor of most other vessels. But for these smaller ships, we'll use armor piercing until we have really shattered the enemy ship's armor, and then we'll switch to HE shells and mess her up really good inside, kill whatever functioning internal she has left. And I'm going to keep slamming shells into her until she is either launching escape pods or she goes up in a big nuclear fireball. The ship animations, even though one could say they're simple, they're also really magnificent, as is the sound. When you get in close to the enemies, you can see every little bit of damage. You can see the guns rotating onto target, and by the way, that's a real thing in Nebulous too. The guns need time to be able to rotate and orient on a target, and if there are things blocking them, a radar tower or something mounted on the ship, they may not be able to rotate all that much. The developers have worked to implement absolute realism, and to me it's just beautiful. I just have never seen anything like this before in the way of space combat. This is like the very best of air-to-air combat and naval combat all combined and put in a space theater. It's just great. Now what I'm doing is I am setting the Loom of Carina to orbit the enemy ship. As a general rule, you don't want to just stop and fire on an enemy ship, because if it still has guns that it can use on you, which I think it still does, you're just sitting there dead heap, which makes you an easy target. So I've established an orbit around this ship, and I'm going to just keep moving and continue to pepper the enemy ship with my own guns. I'm at very close range, so everything I'm firing is hitting. And at this point, I think I've messed up its armor enough that I can safely switch over to high explosive rounds and expect that most of them will penetrate the enemy ship's armor. We can also see at this time its gun stopped firing, its power is down. At this point I could move away and go about capturing territory, but that'll take longer. Switching to high explosive projectiles and utterly destroying this ship will bring about an immediate victory. Notice the color change of the ammo there, the shells. They are green now. The green are the high explosive shells. These do a lot of internal damage, and they're going to finish off pretty quickly what remains of this ship. You can already see the ship is virtually dead. Zooming in close, we can see there are internal fires. The hull is breached in multiple places. The engines are dead. For all I know, the reactor is about to go. But I'm just going to maintain fire on this ship until it's well and truly dead. Best guess is the internal damage has managed to kill all the crew, which is unfortunate, but I haven't seen any life pods launch. So either the ship's going to blow, or we're going to see the timer pop up on the screen at some point that is going to indicate that the ship is dead and the match is over. Status report on the Loom of Karina's internals. She's good. Looks like she hasn't even been touched in this fighter as she was. Damage control has long since repaired it, and the initial damage was only minor anyway. My other ships, they all took some damage, but they're still in the fight. I haven't lost one. We're doing pretty good here. And there's the countdown. The battle's over. Well, I hope you enjoyed this demonstration of Nebulous, Fleet Commander. This is an amazing simulation. And right now, as it's still in beta, you can get it on Steam for $20 to $30, depending on where in the world you live. And I can't recommend it enough. To me, this is space combat as it was meant to be. Some of you may have noticed some similarities with the look of these ships and those ships of the series The Expanse, which itself was born out of an amazing series of books written by James S.A. Corey. And for all I know, the developers took some inspiration from The Expanse. Certainly in terms of combat, The Expanse is noteworthy among science fiction for its efforts to really bring in a conception or a visualization of what space-to-space combat would really be like. Nothing Star Wars-esque and no Star Citizen BFM nonsense. I mean, modern aircraft kill each other dozens of miles away. Shooting an enemy ship at 200 meters or something is just ridiculous. But again, that's a topic for another video. And like I said, maybe you like that kind of thing, or so that's fine. I like the greater realism here. To me, this is space combat the way it was meant to be. And if you love tactics, if you love deep strategy, you love the idea of physics playing a real role, a meaningful role in how the ships, the assets will work, how electronic warfare, how every element of a space combat sim would work, I cannot recommend Nebulous high enough. If I could give it 6 out of 5 stars, I would. Great sim. If you liked this video and you'd like to see more, please take a moment to like and subscribe.